Hey, welcome back to Common Knowledge. I am back from pre-release for Secrets of Strixhaven. Well, actually, I went last night, but had a pretty good time. Still went 1 and 2. wasn't amazing. I went Witherbloom, if you must know. But it did give me a chance to play with some of these new Secrets of Strixhaven cards and get a little bit more experience with them, see how they kind of worked more in the wild, and it gave me some more thoughts about how they play in the Pauper format as well. So I thought I would take a little bit of time to talk about some of the most interesting cards I think there are from Secrets of Strixhaven and how they might play into the Pauper format. If you want to see how I feel about every single common card in Secrets of Strixhaven, I think I've got a card up one of these corners or something where I've done a full Pauper buyer's guide for Secrets of Strixhaven. If you want to watch a 2.5 hour long video, you're welcome to it. I had to do it, so I had to make it. So that's a thing you could do. But if you just are interested in, maybe some of the most interesting cards, where you might be able to play them and what they might also work with, this is the video for you. This won't play very well because I'm only the tiny box here in the corner. But I did grab a couple of nice non-Pauper pulls from my thing. I guess probably the best card I ended up getting was this Ad Nauseam in the Mystical Archives frame. That was pretty cool. But I picked up. I don't think I picked up any money or anything like that. That Ad Naz I think is like $20. It's $20. That's pretty good for a piece of cardboard. But I didn't get any of the Japanese whatevers. Let's go in. I'm not gonna go through this. I've got all these on individual pages. So let's start by color order, and let's talk about Dig Site Inventory. Dig Site Inventory, single white mana for a sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains vigilance until end of turn, and it has flashback for a single white. If that sounds familiar to you, that's because it's the same exact card as this, Homestead Courage, which is played as sometimes a 4 of, sometimes maybe a little less than a 4 of in mono white heroic decks. And so now we have another option for that. I don't know if you're going to play more than 4 copies of Homestead Courage to the point where you'd want to play Dig Site Inventory as well. But I guess you have that option if you're in mono white heroic, or even if you just want to do the kind of Thraben Inspector, Novice Inspector split of 2 and 2 just to have more card variety in there. That's a way you could go potentially. But I think Dig Site Inventory is all right, even if it is literally just Homestead Courage by a different name. Still, solid card, can be useful, was really nice for the lore hold people who had something that they could flash back and get a card out of their graveyard and do some really nice things with it. It seemed like a solid card for limited. Elite Interceptor, single white mana. Speaking of Thraben Inspectors here. Elite Interceptor is a 1/2 human wizard, and this creature enters prepared, which means while it's prepared, you may cast a copy of its prepared spell, and doing so unprepares it. So it's unprepared, and then you have to re-prepare it somehow if you want to cast the spell again. In this instance, you would need to blink it or bounce it back to your hand and play it again because it has no way of re-preparing itself. Some cards do. Some cards go, if you've gained life this turn, the first time you gain life a turn, this creature becomes prepared or something. Or if you've jumped through another hoop, this creature becomes prepared. But most of them were just enters. Like, hey, this thing enters prepared. You get the spell once, and then you don't get the spell anymore. But it is a way of giving you some card advantage. It does kind of work like those adventures from Eldraine, where kind of in the reverse way, where the adventure was you get a spell first and then you get the creature later, or land or whatever, the permanent later. But in this instance, you get this creature and then this creature has a spell that you can cast later, which is kind of nice. It also makes these guys real targets. I know that I got somebody was playing Lorehold against me, and I was very much going, maybe I want to kill that Elite Interceptor before they're able to use this prepared spell on it. And that prepared spell for this card is Rejoinder, which is 1 and a white. It's a sorcery. You may tap or untap target creature and draw a card. So it does work very much like a Thraben Inspector here, which is another 1/2, 1-drop here, and it investigates. So you make a clue token, which you can spend 2 and draw a card with. So this guy is also a 1/2, 1-drop that you can spend 2 and draw a card with. This has a little extra gravy here with the tap or the untap, but it also happens at sorcery speed, where the clue token here can be cracked at instant speed. And also the clue token is a token. It's a separate thing on the board. It's an artifact if you're looking for affinity for artifact strategies. I would say in most cases, the Thraben Inspector or the Novice Inspector are still the ways you want to go if you're playing, white weenie or Orzhov Blade, stuff like that. But this is maybe a nice option to consider. And I think sometimes you will end up wanting to play this card over the others if maybe there's a instant or sorcery type theme that you're going for. And hey, this is a creature that has a sorcery on it that still draws you a card, and that could be pretty useful to you. So that's possible. And this is also reloadable in the same way that Thraben Inspector is, that you can bounce it with your core Skyfishers, play it again, and this one gets you another token, but this one prepares itself again, so you're able to use that spell. So Elite Interceptor I think is cool. I ended up grabbing 4 copies, and I don't know where I'll play him, but I still think it's a cool card. Next is Rapier Wit. It's 1 and a white for an instant. Tap target creature. If it's your turn, put a stun counter on it, and you draw a card. I had somebody play this against me. They tapped down one of my big creatures, and man, that stun counter really does hurt. You really do feel it when you have the stun counter, and that's rough. that is certainly rough. Plus, they're drawing a card, so they've just replaced the effect or replaced the card in their hand, and that can feel pretty good if you're playing it. That you've shut down some real tempo on your opponent for at least a turn, maybe 2, and yet you still get to draw a card, and you have that card advantage ready to go. It's not the most impactful spell. It doesn't really do a heck of a lot for any specific deck, but I think it is just a generically pretty strong card. And maybe if you're in like some kind of proliferate thing, which white isn't usually, but if you do have something that proliferates and uses white, maybe you use that to keep proliferating these stun counters, and you still get the card draw. So it's a nice tempo piece that way. And I thought it was really cool, even if I don't know if it'll necessarily crack into actual factual Pauper metagame. I still think it was a cool card and worth taking a look at and worth considering for your future decks. Shattered Acolyte, 1 and a white for a 2/2 Dwarf Warlock with lifelink. You can pay 1 and sacrifice this creature to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So we've gotten some of these things before. There was a Tarkir cat, Tarkir Dragonstorm cat that had vigilance. It was like 2/2 vigilance, and you could pay 1 and sack it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. This one is very similar. It actually also reminded me a bit of Cathar Commando, which is another 1 and a white that pays 1 to sack and destroys target artifact or enchantment. This guy has flash and is a 3/1 though, but the lifelink 2/2 could be pretty decent in some instances as well. That's a decent enough body. And potentially there are some life gain-ish decks that are kind of nipping at the heels of potential Pauper playability. We don't have a Johnny's Pride mate yet, but until we do, this might just be a decent option of keeping some life gain in there, but also being able to threaten those artifacts or enchantments that opponents have. Now, the Cathar Commando does have flash, which is really nice to be able to do that at instant speed. You flash this guy in and use his ability at instant speed, and you get the value out of it that way, whereas you have to at least cast this guy at sorcery speed and give your opponent a chance to try to stop him or try to kill this acolyte before and force you into a situation where you either have to use the mana and use the naturalized kind of ability, or just let him go, let him die. But I think he's all right. I thought that card was kind of cool. On to blue. Banishing Betrayal, 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and you surveil 1. The first card I thought of when I saw this was Boomerang. And Boomerang, it is 2 blue, so it's a little harder to cast, but it can return any permanent, even a land. And that's really the best part of Boomerang, is that you can return the land and get some crazy tempo on that. Banishing Betrayal doesn't get to do that. It is a non-land permanent, but still, that does return quite a bit of stuff, and the Surveil is nice. It's just a nice little addition there. I don't think this is going to crack Pauper playability either. I think we have enough other unsummoned kind of effects that we would play instead of this. But I still liked it. I still thought there was some value here, and I think that just a little extra gravy of Surveil was a solid addition to a card like this. Procrastinate. I keep thinking this might be a really sneaky good card. X and a blue for a sorcery, tap target creature, put twice X stun counters on it. So you can just pay blue for this, and X being 0, and you still tap down their creature at not at instant speed, at sorcery speed. And that's okay. It's not amazing. It's not the best spell in the world for sure, but it is useful even at 1 mana. But now consider this as a modal spell that, okay, I spend 2 mana and I tap down that creature and it gets 2 stun counters because it's twice X. You spend 3 mana and now it gets 4 stun counters. And now anything past that, and that creature is basically out of the entire game. Stun counters are really tough to deal with once they're on your creature. It just feels like it completely walls a creature, and that can be really nice sometimes. If you get to put this down on a Gurmag Angler or a Cryptic Serpent or something like that, even if you pay the extra 2 mana to put it on a Tolarian Terror, like this can really just completely take that creature out of the game and out of the equation for most, if not the rest of the match. I think there's something here, and I'd want to see people try it out, and I might try it out. I do have a couple copies of it, and I think that could be an interesting thing. Normally blue wants to be playing at instant speed, but I think the idea of just, hey, your creature's just not going to do anything for the next 4 turns is an enticing idea. I'm not opposed to it. Glorious Decay is 1 and a green for an instant. Choose 1, destroy target artifact. Glorious Decay deals 4 damage to target creature with flying, or exile target creature from a graveyard, and you draw a card. So this might seem pretty familiar too. It's very close to Heritage Reclamation from Tarkir Dragonstorm. That one has the kind of naturalize effect for, it's still an instant at 2 mana. You can destroy target artifact or target enchantment, and then it has exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and draw a card. So 2 of the 3 effects are exactly the same, the artifact and the exile from the graveyard effect with the card draw. But this one also can target enchantments. This one could target creatures with flying. There are plenty of creatures with flying in the Pauper format. You think about all the fairies, you think about core Skyfishers that have 3 toughness, you think about Glinthawks that have 2 toughness, and this card does deal with all of them. It does a pretty solid job. Oh, there's the 7 mana Eldrazi that draws a card when you cast it. I think it's like a 3/4, so that's another thing that this thing can take out. This takes out most of the flyers you're going to deal with that aren't, the pinnacle kill ship once it's crewed, or once it's stationed rather. Crewed? No, stationed. Yeah, stationed. So I think this could potentially see some play, some sideboard play, but still could potentially see some play. This is still good when it comes to Mono White Heroic or Bogle's decks, but as those potentially decrease in the meta, or if we do get a time where those decrease in the meta, artifacts are always going to be important, and this one can also destroy the artifacts. And the exiling a card from a graveyard in Pauper is almost always good too. There's so many decks that deal with the graveyard that having that ability is not too bad either. But I could see, hey, I'm playing against way more Fairies decks or way more Orzhov Blade decks than I am Bogles or Mono White Heroic decks. Maybe I want to put Glorious Decay in my sideboard instead of the Heritage Reclamation. So I think this is a solid piece to have available to you as a sideboard thing, and I think it will see play. Next up is Oracle's Restoration. Single green mana for a sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. You draw a card and you gain 1 life. None of those things individually are all that great, but when you put all 3 of those things together for a single mana, I think it's not bad. Especially because in this set, Witherbloom especially, where that's where I was playing on pre-release, there are cards that really care about gaining life. And this is a nice, easy way to gain life and still get you plenty of other things. It draws that card, drawing a card for a single mana, not too bad. Gaining a life and getting a little boost to your power and toughness just for the turn is solid. I don't know if this is quite good enough to really see Pauper play unless we get a green life gain or a green deck that cares about life gain. And with this set, we might have gotten there, especially when you see my next couple of picks here. But I think Oracle's Restoration has somewhat of a chance if that deck starts to kind of see play or coalesces together at some point here in the near future. Not the best card for sure, but I think it had an interesting suite of abilities on it that I was willing to mention it here. Next, maybe the best common in the whole set. It's Studious First Year, single green mana for a 1/1 bear wizard, and it enters prepared. And its prepared spell is Rampant Growth. 1 and a green for the sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. You know what Rampant Growth does. It's a classic. This is just a really good card. A really good card overall. It's going to be played in Commander games, but I think it probably does work in Pauper too. This is something I don't have it. You know what? I'll just look it up here. I didn't put it in my extra ones, but you kind of know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Sakura, Tribe, Elder. Steve here is a 1/2 for a 1/1 Snake Shaman. You sacrifice this creature to search your land or search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle. So very, very similar here. But this is 2 mana to get out in the first place, and this guy can come out on turn 1, and then turn 2 you can use your Rampant Growth. Now that is 3 mana that you're using, whereas Steve here only ends up costing you 2 at all. So we are paying an extra mana for that, but Steve has to sacrifice himself. The bear doesn't. The bear just sticks around. So you do get to keep the 1/1 body and continue attacking or blocking with it. And with Tribe Elder, the idea was, okay, well, it can block 1 big creature and then sacrifice itself. And that's nice too. That can be useful. But I think for most decks, you're going to find that Studious First Year as just a 1-drop that they can play out and then ramp on turn 2, guaranteed. 2 spells on a single card. That's card advantage too. I think you're going to find that people are going to like this card quite a bit. I don't know if it necessarily goes into the green ramp decks or the Gruul ramp decks, but I think people will try it out, and I think it'll probably be versatile enough to find play in other places as well. And one of the things I really also like about it is that you could bounce or blink it, and then it becomes prepared again, and you can cast that Rampant Growth turn over turn over turn. And that's pretty sweet too, if you were really just trying to get a bunch of lands. So Studious First Year, I think, is a really wonderful card from Secrets of Strixhaven. On to the multicolor, we got Bog Water Lumerette for a black and a green. That is Witherbloom colors here. And it's a 2/2 Spirit Frog, and when this creature or another creature you control enters, you gain a life. We've seen plenty of these in white, but almost all of those, if not all of those, just say another creature. This guy gains you the life when he comes into play too. And that is pretty sweet and almost makes it worth paying that extra mana for. Most of those guys, the Lunarch Veterans or the Soul Wardens, they only cost a single mana. But this guy costing 2, he is also beefier than any of those as well, being a 2/2. And he can just gain you life turn over turn over turn. I was really disappointed I didn't get one of these guys in my pre-release pack because I needed it. I really needed it to make my game plan go. It's probably the reason I ended up going 1 and 2. I just didn't have the engine that could keep gaining me life turn over turn. and that ended up being a real bummer, and probably the reason I lost a number of matches. But I think it's a cool card, and like I said with which card was that? It was the Oracle's Restoration here. If we do get some kind of green black white deck that's all about gaining life, I think that the Bogwater Lumerette is going to be a pretty useful piece in that deck. If you end up splashing white, maybe you cut these for the Soul Wardens and the Lunarch veterans and things like that. But if we can go without the white and just make it a straight Golgari color deck, then the Lumerette's going to show up there. We'll see if that actually makes it into a deck, but I think we have enough commons now where it's worth consideration. And one of those other commons that we got from Secrets of Strixhaven is Pest Mascot. 1 and a black and a green for a 2/3 Pest Ape with Trample. Whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So close to Unto Johnny's Pride Mate, but it does still cost the extra mana, which is a little rough. And it is in black and green, where most of your easy life gain cards are going to be in white. So do you make it Abzan? I don't know if life gain strategies are good enough to justify being in 3 colors for Pauper, but still, I think, especially with this set and some of the new toys we got, it might be more feasible to try a black-green life gain deck in Pauper. Where are they? I did end up getting a whole set of the Pest Mascots. They're my boys. Got a whole set. Got 3 of them in my pre-release pack, and then got a 4th one in my prize packs. And I felt pretty good about it. Like, damn, these guys are gonna get so big, and having 3 of them in your 40 card deck, like, this is gonna be very consistent. But I just never had those engines to gain life efficiently and effectively turn after turn, and so sometimes these guys just didn't grow, and it was real sad. I did have an opponent. I had a Witherbloom Mirror at one point, and I think he got his up to an 8/9, and that was like, man, that's really cool. I wish my deck could do that. But I did get to see the power of this guy, and having that trample is just really important. Now, plus, we have this card from the last Strixhaven set, which is Blood Researcher, 1 black-green, very similar casting cost for a 2/2 Vampire Druid with Menace, and when you gain life, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So 2/2 with Menace or 2/3 with Trample, I think this one is better, but I don't know if you're necessarily going to play 8 copies of this kind of effect. But maybe you play 2 of these as well in that deck just to have some more creatures that really care about life gain, and those guys are going to be the real damage dealers here. And Menace is still pretty good too. You're either going to force tough blocks because they have to block twice with 2 different creatures, or you're just going to get in for damage better, sometimes better than the trample can. But yeah, I think they are both good cards, and when you put those together with the Bogwater Lumerette, with some other green cards and black cards that help you gain life, I think they're the bones of this. We need to find some more and better 2-drops and 1-drops. The Lumerette's going to be a good 2-drop for that, but do we have enough to make that a viable deck? I don't really know, but I kind of want to try it out, Next is Pursue the Past, a Lorehold card here, red and a white, that is also known as Boros colors. For a sorcery, you gain 2 life, you may discard a card. If you do, you draw 2 cards, and it has flashback for 2, a red and a white. So we've seen plenty of these before, these grab the prize style effects that are 2 mana, you discard a card, you draw a card. Grab the prize is probably the best one here, in that it also does a little damage. You can do some really dirty things when you have Madness cards, so you're discarding the Madness card and then casting the Madness card to do more damage. Plus, this is doing the damage because you discarded a non-land card. Whew, that can get pretty dirty pretty quick. But it also reminded me a little bit of Laughing Mad, which is 3 mana instead of 2 mana. This one's still 2 mana, even though it's 2 different colors. This is 3 mana for an instant speed. You get to do it at instant speed instead of just sorcery speed. I don't think most Pauper decks care about this effect being played at instant speed. They're usually just fine with it being played at sorcery speed. But you still do get the discard and the draw two, and this also has flashback for 4 mana. Now, again, this is easier to cast color wise. You're just in red here, whereas Pursue the Past is in that Boros colors, those Lorehold colors. But this effect being able to be used again is really good. And another thing to consider is the life gain is also pretty good. That's going to keep you alive a little bit longer and give you a little bit more resilience against those mono red madness decks. And I think that's interesting. Hey, another card that you can play Sneaky Snacker with. But I think the life gain and the ability to use this twice is pretty darn solid. And I wonder if we will actually see some of those mono red decks or even some of those Izzet decks that might go into, or even Rakdos decks. Maybe they'll try to splash into white instead of those other secondary colors, or in mono red's case, no secondary color. Maybe they will try to get into white to get this effect, because it is a really good effect, especially when you know you get to use it twice. Okay. A Spirit Mascot is red and a white for a 2/2 Spirit Ox. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So kind of with the similar to the Pest Mascot, which is, wow, this thing can really gain a lot of +1/+1 counters over the course of a turn or two. This doesn't have to do the life gain with it. It just has. Think of all the ways you have of getting things out of your graveyard. You've got any number of the flashback cards that we talked about here, but also you can use Relic of Progenitus on yourself if you wanted to. Right? You can use Relic of Progenitus on yourself. It's not a. Oh no! Stop hitting buttons. Relic of target player. Yeah, so you can totally exile a card from yourself if you want to. If you're going to put this main deck, maybe your opponent isn't playing a graveyard deck, so you don't have to take cards out of their graveyard, or they don't have anything that's important in their graveyard yet, so you don't have to do that. You could target yourself instead and be able to continue putting +1/+1 counters on this guy. Maybe you have reanimation style effects. There's all sorts of ways to get cards out of your graveyard. And this guy can get really big. Now, he is just vanilla creature, unlike Pest Mascot that has trample. This guy can just get big. But sometimes, especially when it's just 2 mana, sometimes getting big is plenty. It is just plenty. So I'm a little less sure that we'll see something like this in a Pauper deck, but I think we do have so many ways to get cards out of the graveyard that it's possible. Sneaky Snacker as well. Like, imagine Sneaky Snacker with something like this, that the Sneaky Snacker comes into play tapped once you draw your third card, but this guy also gets a +1/+1 counter on him while you do that. It's making those discard 1 draw 2s even sicker somehow. So yeah, I think he's pretty cool. Another Lorehold card that I like. I think Lorehold has some pretty sweet cards in here, even if that's not usually a color combination I'm all that interested in playing. 2, a red and a white for an instant, but this spell costs 2 less to cast if 1 or more cards left your graveyard this turn. Wilt in the Heat deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, you exile it instead. Not a hugely crazy card, but the thing I want to point out with this is that 5 damage is kind of the magic number in many settings. Think about 3 of the scariest creatures in Pauper to be on the other side of. And that is, I mention them all the time on my videos. Gurmag Angler, Cryptic Serpent, and Tolarian Terror. All have 5 toughness. If you can hit them with this, they're gone. They're just gone for good. They're exiled. They're out of the game. And that can be a pretty solid option, especially when you can do it for just 2 mana. You have to jump through a couple hoops, but those hoops are pretty easy to jump through. And getting to do that for just 2 mana, or I guess in Tolarian Terror's case, 4 mana, which is still a whole lot better than the 6 mana you might have to pay for that, is pretty nice. Just getting rid of those cards and not having to worry about them for the rest of the game, especially in the Gurmag Angler matchup because being black, that is a color that is so much better about reanimation than blue is, and usually Dimir Terror decks too that can potentially bring their creatures back. But I think Wilt in the Heat might potentially see some sideboard play. Maybe not, but anytime that you see an instant that can deal 5 damage, especially when it can exile the creature as well, I think that's worth paying attention to. Okay, I've got 2 more cards here. I've got Page Looseleaf, which is 2 mana for a legendary artifact creature construct. It taps to add a colorless, but it also has Grandeur for, Grandeur discards another card named Page Looseleaf, and that's its cost. But then you can reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an instant or sorcery card. You put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's also a 0/2. I think this is fascinating. And depending on how you build your deck, we can find some really cool cards with this, and make them pretty guaranteed too. Now you have to have 2 copies of this to be able to pull this off, at least 2 copies, because one has to be on the board and you have to discard another copy. But if you build your deck in a way that there's only 1 instant or sorcery, or 4 copies of 1 instant or sorcery that that you want, like that's the card that's going to change this whole game. I can't think of like a super combo piece, but I know they're out there. Maybe you can tell me in the comments. But just going and being able to find your bomb instant or sorcery that's going to win the game, this is a cool way of finding it. And the thing taps for colorless, so it can potentially help you cast that on the turn that you need to find it. So that's interesting to me. I think this is a card that has some really cool potential and interaction to it. Even if you're not going to find the combo piece, it's still pretty good to trade in other copies of the 0/2 to go find an instant or sorcery that might save you. Can you find the removal spell? Can you find the board wipe? Can you find, the draw spell that you're going to need? I think it's going to take some people doing a little bit of research in the lab, but we're going to start seeing some decks where Page Looseleaf is really good. And I could even see, and again, I don't know what the combos are to know how dangerous this is, but I could potentially even see a future where we go, whew, maybe we need to ban Page Looseleaf. We'll see. I'm certainly not there yet. I want to see what happens first, but I think the potential with a card like this, not only now and thinking about all the cards that we have interactions with currently, but what do we see in the future, and what potentially people will be thinking, oh, that's an incredible instant or sorcery that I can grab with Page. Maybe I can build a whole Pauper deck around it and go find that card. I also think this is a really good example of how to use the legendary in Pauper effectively. We've had plenty of TMNT and Spider-Man cards that I feel like they're just kind of jamming legends in for no good reason other than to sell more packs and not really doing it because they're good mechanically. I think this is a card where it feels like, oh, that is legendary, but also it's just 1 page of a book. that does feel common as well. I think this is a good card overall. I'm really excited about it from both a flavor and a mechanical perspective. So last card I want to talk about, I don't think these are going to be incredible, but I do want to talk about the common dual lands of the set. I have here Forum of Amity, which is the Orzhov/Silverquill one here, but it's a land that enters tapped, and you can tap it for 1 of 2 colors, in this case black or white, and you can pay 2 white and black and tap it to surveil 1. We just got, not too long ago, the Avatar lands that also enter tap for 2 colors, and you can pay 4, I think it's just 4 generic, and sacrifice the land to draw a card. And those are pretty good. Those also were a slight upgrade over the Streets of New Capenna lands, common lands that I think you'd have to pay 2 and 2 different colors of, or maybe 1 and 3 different colors of, and sacrifice to draw the card. So those were a slight upgrade to those. This is more of a side grade. Yes, you get to keep the land. You don't have to sacrifice it, but you only get a surveil instead of a draw, which is most of the time worse. But I did find these to be a really useful limited card at the very least, where I got to a point of I don't have any cards in my hand. I don't necessarily want to go down on mana. I probably would have, if we were playing Avatar and I had that land instead, I would have gone down on lands to get the card. But even here, I was using it sometimes at the end of an opponent's turn, or when I got really desperate in one game, used it at the beginning of my upkeep to surveil before I got my next card. It only left me with 2 mana, but thankfully the card that was on top was just 2 mana, and it was nice to know, okay, I've got whatever I need to cast this next card. But if it was a land, I could have also pitched it and hopefully gotten something better than that. I don't think these will really see play. I think we have enough dual lands that are just better than this straight up. But maybe you could see a copy if you have a very strong 2-color deck that is playing both colors pretty equally. I could potentially see this being played just to give you that extra little bit of advantage. Most of the time, though, I think we're going to stick to the bridges. We're going to stick to the tap duels with the land types on them, the snow lands that are tapped with the land types on them. We're probably going to see those a lot more. The gain lands, the deserts. There's a lot of options, but I think these were, at least from a limited perspective, pretty solid lands. And who knows, maybe they could slip 1 or 2 of in a Pauper deck someday. That is all of it. Those are all the cards I thought of. No black cards and no red cards. I'm not saying that those colors were bad. I just didn't really see anything that would affect the Pauper format all that much. But I think there was a handful of cards that I'm intrigued by and want to see more of. I've got all my cards that I know that I want that I didn't get in packs from my pre-release, and I got all those coming to me from Mana Pool. And we'll see. I'm excited to see where the meta shifts and reacts to this set. I think some of those cards that I mentioned, especially something like Studious First Year, maybe Page, Glorious Decay. I think some of these cards will instantly slot into some decks, and I think some will need to simmer a little bit more. But seems like a pretty solid set. I'm pretty happy with it, both from a Pauper perspective and also from just a general perspective. It's nice to be universes within, but it is also just nice when the cards are mechanically interesting. And I think that's what we got from Secrets of Strixhaven. Anyway, I will see you on the next video. Till then, bye.